we're making it so that it's almost illegal sometimes to take a risk.
Hey guys, welcome to this first installment of our book discussion on Coffee, Coffee, Coffee. I just wanted to let you know that we are going to discuss a lot of stuff in the book, so there's some spoilers in there. And also the book has some adult content, so if you've got sensitive ears around there, you may not want to let them watch this video. I hope you guys enjoy it, and feel free to comment below on things that we've said if the comment section is open for discussion. Hey, welcome to Coffee, Coffee, Coffee book discussion. Today we are discussing Brave New World by Aldous Huxley, and we are drinking Good and Gather's organic Ethiopian Yirgacheffe. If you want to see the full or the review of this coffee, just follow the link in the description and you can see that on this channel as well. But getting to the book, we think everybody should read this book.
Or should they? I don't know.
Should they?
We don't want to control people, which is something in this book.
Right, yes.
But, you know, I was thinking about this before we started recording. Why subject yourself to reading a dystopian novel? This is like, I would say this and 1984 are probably the most popular dystopian novels. And I mean, it's an old book and it's kind of depressing to read it. It's like you don't have really a pleasant experience when you're reading this. But I think that kind of gets to the heart of what it's all about. Because in the book, everyone is controlled by pleasure, basically. The government has made it so that everyone is constantly getting all of their needs met. Like all of the pleasure they want is just given to them through soma, which is this drug.
Right.
And so then the question becomes, why would that be so bad? I mean, some people will ask that question. Well, would that be so bad if that came to fruition? And I think it's a nightmare.
Yeah. You know, so many people love drama in their lives because it's adventure. And we thrive on adventure.
Right. I think it kind of goes back to what is life really all about? Is it just about pleasure per se, like happiness just caused by pleasure? And I don't think that's true. Like when I think about the most meaningful things in life, is it really those days where I was the happiest? I don't think so. I think it's usually the difficult times, the things where I was really challenged by something, like, well, childbirth.
Right.
That'd be an example of excruciating pain.
But also overwhelming joy.
Right, that's what I mean. But it's almost like you can't have that true joy without this really bad pain that comes with it.
Well, yeah. How do you know what's joyful, what happiness is, if you don't know what sadness is?
That's true.
How can you really judge the two or compare them? That's the same with anything. If you don't know what the opposite of that thing is.
Right. How could you know what good is without evil?
Right.
But yeah, so I don't know if this novel, I mean, you know, it was written so long ago.
1931.
Was it 31?
Yeah. That's
Wow.
when it was first published.
That was even earlier than what I thought it was.
Yeah.
So he certainly had some ideas about what a bad future would look like. And I gotta say, for him to kind of guess at the future is pretty incredible, because I feel like there's a lot of stuff. Not everything in this book is coming to pass, right? But there are a lot of things I feel like are coming to pass. Like soma in the book was a pill. Like you take this pill, and it's just a drug. Yeah, that's all it is. It numbs the pain.
It was a pill and also a pacifier,
right,
or a vapor.
Right,
to put out into the into a room.
Right, yeah. It took many forms, but the general principle is it's some sort of drug that makes it so that you don't care about the pain. If you have a negative feeling, you pop a soma, and you know, I think certainly, you know, you can look at today's culture and think, well, we do have an element to that, at least, where it's like any kind of, you know, any bit of negative feeling, people, you know, some people will like to say, oh, well, you should be on antidepressants, and you should like any kind of pain, you should take these really addictive painkillers. And I'm not saying that it's never a good idea.
Mm-hmm.
I think that there are certainly cases where if you are truly depressed, like clinical depression, then yes, that's something that you should take care of. But the idea that just every negative feeling needs to be demolished, I don't think that's really helpful. Like usually there's things I think that need to be dealt with.
Yeah.
And by popping a pill, maybe you get rid of the pain in the short term, but not in the long term, because you have to just keep taking that pill in order to keep that negative emotion away.
Right. And it's not just a pill. Now in the book, it's a pill. It's the soma, the vapor, whatever. But in our world, it's food, it's alcohol, it's coffee? Maybe.
No.
Caffeine is a drug. But it comes in many forms. It could even be in like pornography,
right? Where
people just say that's where they have to escape.
Could it be really that our soma of today is really television and anything with screens, social media included, just this thing that distracts us from any pain or discomfort we may feel,
right. But the sad thing about that is that you're trying to escape sadness, but then you get into that whole comparison syndrome, which creates a whole other sadness where you're seeing everybody in their highlight reel. So it backfires.
Right. Yeah.
on you.
Yeah. And so I wonder, this, the idea that soma of today is television. I came across that idea from Neil Postman's book, Amusing Ourselves to Death. And he really talks a lot about how, before we had television, people had a great capacity for thinking, for really long attention spans. The Douglas debates, I think that was a thing that he talked about. And they were like 4 to 5 hours long. He was debating Abraham Lincoln. And people had an appetite for that. These are just regular people. These are not the high elite intellectuals. This is just the general population goes for hours and sits at these lectures and read the text of those lectures. It's ridiculously complex ideas. And I think now, we have this tendency to think, anything previous to our generation, they were less intelligent. And that seems to be a popular sentiment right now, that, they were just less intelligent, and we're so much better now. But I don't think that the facts bear that out. And so the idea that, maybe television is soma, that is a thing that has made it so that we just can't concentrate. And we just you put a book or television in front of a kid,
there's no contest.
There's no contest. Yeah. We've learned that. Even though our kids, we homeschool, so our kids love to read. Not to say that every homeschool kid loves to read, but our kids do love to read. But if we just give them the option, you can do whatever you want with your time. We're not going to put any, because we've experimented with this. We trust you to make the right decisions. Kids don't make that decision the correct way. As far as they will go to the easiest option every time. They just will go to the television. They won't just voluntarily pick up the book, because it's harder. It's harder to pick up a book and to just think about things. It takes more calories. I think there is some neuroscience here, right? Where it's your body is always trying to save as many calories as it possibly can. And so when you give it the option, I could sit here and watch TV, or I could sit here and read a book. Your base is going to be the thing that's going to say, well, I would rather sit here and watch TV. Right. So,
and that's not just kids.
But
adults certainly have that same thing.
Right.
I think on average, adults read 1 book a year. Right. And
Meanwhile,
so that means that there are some people who haven't read a book ever.
Right. Yeah. And, average television watching is 3 hours a day as of this year. And social media usage is at 2 hours or 2.5 hours. So that's 5 to 6 hours a day people are spending on screens. Let's say you get 8 hours at work and you've got 5 hours of social media. That's
And
13
8 hours of
and
sleep.
8 hours of sleep. And then, you've got a few hours to, run your life with, but so many people.
It's left over for eating.
Yeah. I mean, and we've certainly been in these same kind of patterns throughout our marriage and stuff, where it's like, you're at a job you don't like. And that's like 78% of Americans don't like the job they're in. So, and what does that life look like? You wake up, you eat breakfast, you go to work, you come home, and you put on the television, and you
Why wouldn't you?
Like you veg out.
Yeah.
You don't. You're in your mind, you're like, I'm exhausted. I just want to sit here, and then you watch TV until you fall asleep, and that's like your life, and it's a way to escape from the pain, I think. I mean, when I think about any television watching in the past, generally it was like, not because everything's just so entertaining
or
even.
provoking.
Yeah, thought-provoking.
Thought-provoking.
Yeah, it's just like, well, this beats reality. Like it's an escape from reality. So I do think there's some credence to that idea that our soma of these days, it is present, and it's television.
Yeah, and television and social media and anything where somebody replaces their real life with a substance of some sort.
Of some sort. To get rid of pain.
Right. But they're like activities that people do that are good for them. Mm-hmm. That's a different way that some people can eliminate pain, right? Mm-hmm. Let's say somebody wants to escape their 9 to 5 work, and then on the weekend they go kayaking. Mm-hmm. That's beneficial,
right?
And because it allows you to get back to nature and just think.
But that, I think, is more difficult. I mean, there's going to be some level of pain, danger also, and that makes it more difficult to make that choice. That was something in the book. There's a quote that the savage says, "But I don't want comfort. I want God. I want poetry. I want real danger. I want freedom. I want goodness. I want sin." So I think there's something to that, that I think Huxley was trying to drive at. Like, if you make it so that this is what society is, it is people are never unhappy. Like any kind of negative emotion is taken care of with this pill. So whether that's TV or whatever, as long as you just get rid of the pain in that way, what you are going to lose is freedom, is art, is danger. And I feel like there's an element of that is coming into the culture. This idea that everything has to be 100% safe, and we're making it so that it's almost illegal sometimes to take a risk. And I think that is like going to lead to a dystopian type future if we don't realize that by saying, well, if safety has to be our number one priority always in everything, it will lead to this place where you don't have freedom. And what kind of life is that really when it's 100% safe? There is no risk, there is no God, it's just always pleasure all the time.
Right. And safety is not number one.
No.
You hear companies all the time, safety is our number one priority, especially now. If you go into a store, their pre-recorded message says, our customers and our employees' safety is our number one priority. And that is a big fat lie.
Right.
Their number one priority is making a profit and staying in business, which is fine. We are totally on board with that.
Right.
But if an airline's number one priority is safety, the planes would never leave the ground.
Never.
The stores would not be open. So don't buy into that.
Right.
That safety is the number one priority.
Right.
You couldn't live.
No, you can't. Yeah, you can't live. And I think that is the whole point, right? Maybe you could theoretically be alive in that kind of society. Like your heart beats and you are alive in that sense, but you're not really alive. There's more to life than just surviving, I think.
Yeah. You had mentioned about the removal of art and history. And that's certainly a present element in the book, where it's like, it's pointless. They have no idea who Shakespeare is.
Oh, yeah.
Their timeline begins when Henry Ford created the Model T and the assembly line.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and Henry Ford is their God.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Right.
that's when time began.
Right.
There's nothing before that.
Mm-hmm.
So they've got this, and the reason why Huxley wrote it that way is because he was seeing consumerism as a big
Right. Mm-hmm.
downfall
Right.
of the country, of the world. And so he made Henry Ford their God.
Yeah.
And even though he never said Henry Ford,
He just
said our Ford.
Yeah,
right?
year of our Ford.
Yeah.
And I think that it does tie in. I mean, again, if you think about Soma as being television and consumerism, if you watch less TV, we've noticed this.
Mm-hmm.
The less TV we started to watch, the less we wanted to consume. Like, because you're not being advertised to all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you're watching TV now, it's changed a bit with streaming and stuff, but generally speaking, if you're just watching television, every 5 minutes you're getting interrupted,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a bunch of ads showing you stuff that you don't want, and it's really well done a lot of times, and it makes you want to buy stuff, it makes you want
Mm-hmm.
to eat stuff. But if you just don't watch TV, it takes away a lot of that. Like, I want to go, like, even like watching movies and stuff, like I don't know what's out.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore I have no desire really to go, because like I haven't seen it, so it's like not on your radar anymore.
Yeah, it takes away the power of
Mm-hmm.
those companies to market to you,
Mm-hmm.
To get you to just consume more and more,
Mm-hmm.
which is what this another point in the book was. Don't mend things that are broken.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Just get rid of it and buy the new thing.
Buy new.
Just get
right.
the new thing. Buy the
Mm-hmm.
new thing. That was a big point to their whole engineering.
Mm-hmm.
Was when they would train the people from birth.
From birth,
with
yeah.
their sleep, the hypnopedia, the
right.
sleep training, just to buy.
Right.
That's where you get your happiness. Just
Mm-hmm.
continue getting something new.
Mm-hmm. And again, those messages are being, like, kids are being marketed to, certainly. Like,
Mm-hmm.
if you pop your kid in front of the TV and just let that be your babysitter, they're getting marketed to constantly, and it does create this want, and they then think, well, I want that.
Mm-hmm.
I want like all these cool toys. I mean, I remember being a kid and watching a bunch of TV and being like, well, I want that, and I want that, and I want that. But if you're just not watching it, you don't really. I mean, there's just not a whole heck of a lot that you really need, to go buy.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think there is this definite link there between what he was starting to see. I think that is coming to pass, or has come to pass. And on the other hand, there are movements now like minimalism and that kind of thing. So maybe the tide is turning the other way. Like, I feel like there's at least a questioning of, is this the best way to, run our lives?
Yeah, which that could have been present. It's just now there are avenues for minimalists to get their information out, right?
Mm-hmm.
There could have been people before who were living that type of life, but it's
Right.
like, doing a documentary on minimalism was not something that somebody could just release 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And now it's pretty easy
Right.
to make a thing and put it out and then get the word spread.
Right.
Especially
Through
since everybody's
television, though.
right. Yeah. Yeah. But to get that idea to the person who is sitting there just flipping through Netflix or whatever, and they say, what's minimalism? Right.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a good thing. They may get that information.
Right.
I was reminded of our oldest child, who is now 15, but when he was younger and he would spend time in front of the TV, he would come to us and talk about, hey, there's this thing, I don't know if you know about it, but it does this and it does that, and it's really neat.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just how it just gets pulled into it. And TV, I saw something about this today. TV, when you just sit there in front of it, it activates different waves in your brain,
Mm-hmm.
the same way that hypnotizing does. So in the book, they talked about hypnopedia, which was the sleep training.
Mm-hmm.
So they would, as they're growing up, they have to listen to these recordings, repeating things over and over again about not mending things, but buying something new, or about how whatever level of person you were.
Mm-hmm.
What am I trying to say there? Like, they had the alphas.
The caste.
Yeah,
The
they had,
caste
right.
system, yeah.
They had the alphas, the betas, the
Gamma, delta,
delta,
epsilon.
and the epsilons. And so all of them were trained with this like you are happy as an epsilon, even though the epsilons were the lowest caste, and they were the ones who were having to do the hard manual labor in order to keep things going. So they were trained with that over and over and over to get that through their head. Television does the same thing. So if you're sitting there watching television, those brainwaves are activated. So everything you see on there is sticking into your brain. So whether it's all the terrible stuff that's happening with coronavirus, or this product, or those people, like how happy they are because they're drinking this seltzer, water, whatever it is, that's getting ingrained, and you have no idea that it's happening. Yeah, but that's the way your brain is getting saturated with it.
Right. Yeah. And especially if you're sitting in front of it for hours at a time, day after day, I think at least limiting exposure is helpful. Like the idea that these are harmful things that people are doing, and you're probably not even aware of it, that it is. Like I know that when we first got rid of television, I mean, we have television to a certain extent, but back in the day, with like the first foray we had into not having television anymore, like we just canceled the thing and it was like, it's not on. There's like a detox period where it's almost like, what am I supposed to do with, how are we supposed to have conversations? Like, even if you think you're good at conversation, you'll be surprised, I think, if you just don't have the TV on, because it's like, so many times you depend on the television to be the thing that makes it so that you don't have to have conversations, or like if it gets awkward, let's just watch TV. And it's a good distraction, but I don't think ultimately it's the best.
Yeah.
But,
and if you think about like if you're having a conversation with somebody and then TV is on, your conversation tends to stop and you focus then on the television, or conversely, if there's no TV and you have a pause in your conversation, it's really awkward and you don't know what to do with it if you're not used to that.
Right.
But it's far better to be able to just jump back into the thing and continue that conversation.
Yeah. And that's the same kind of battle that happens in this book. John, there's this savage John who comes into society. Like he was raised, in the backwards way. Like he was actually birthed by a mother.
So the book takes place in New London, where everything is created by the government. So everybody is basically a test tube baby.
Everyone is.
Yeah. There is no mother. There's no
family unit.
No family unit at all. Everybody belongs to everybody. But in New Mexico, there is a group of savages who are people who live the old way.
Right.
And so this is where John, the savage, comes from.
Right. And so the ideas of monogamy and family, that's like obscene to the people in New London. And instead, everything is sexual promiscuity, because everybody belongs to everybody else. That you don't just belong to one other person. So it's very backwards from what we would think. So he goes into civilization, and what ends up happening is it's like he can't defeat civilization. And I feel like the same type of thing happens. Like we talked about, like we got rid of television just for good for a while, but then it's very difficult then to how do you fit into society really when you kind of get rid of things that are important to a large proportion of society. I mean, it's something we've struggled with a lot. Like, how much of this do you let into your life in order to be able to talk to people intelligently? There is a thing that can happen. We've seen it happen. I think a lot of homeschoolers struggle with this, because it's like there's this real danger in making your world so different than the general population that you stick out and your kids stick out, and it's like you can't really be a part of society. And I know that it's kind of a popular notion for a lot of people, like, I just want to go out on the land and be like just a homesteader and be away from society. But but I don't know that it works that way. I don't think that's ideal. I think it's better to be a part of society, but I think it's just difficult to know at what, how much soma do you take, and in order to be a part of society, but yet, I don't know. I just think it's a difficult thing.
Yeah, and John the Savage couldn't figure it out either.
No.
I mean, he ended up hanging himself.
Yeah, he hung himself.
He could not change these people.
Yeah, and I think
or anyone around him.
Right, and I mean, so I guess Huxley was saying, you can't, you can't. You can't integrate the two. I mean, that's what I guess if it gets too far in that direction, he saw it as like it's a hopeless case. I think there's always hope, I guess I'm an optimist in that way. But I do think that there are lessons to be learned from this book about, okay, if you let civilization, and so what role do people have? I mean, what responsibility do people have in the civilization when they see these troubling things happen? What is their, what are you supposed to do? And it made me think of, it just made me think about the part in the book. Do you remember where they had this experiment where all the alphas, they were on an island, like they were going to say, okay, what if we just let the alphas, who are like the upper crust of society, okay, let the alphas be on there. What will it turn into? Like if we don't have this caste system, if we just say, everybody just do what you want to do, it was terrible. There was all this destruction, and they asked the government to come in and please fix this for us. And I think that happens, I mean, people, the idea that there's some evil force, in government or whatever that would just do this. I don't think that's how it would really happen. I think it's more like people voluntarily giving up their freedom and saying, we don't want freedom. We just want you to take care of it.
Right. Yeah. I think a lot of times people are like that. They would rather be taken care of than be burdened with freedom.
Right. Yeah. Is freedom too much of a burden?
I don't know if it's too much of a burden, but it is a burden when you have to figure out how to do things, how to get what you need for your life. It's like entrepreneurialism. Is that the right word? Where you have the freedom to do whatever you want. And the end result could be fabulous. But the end result could also be devastating.
Right. So if freedom can be devastating, is it something to strive for? I mean, really, I think people have this. I mean, I think there is a battle going on right now, in our culture, the idea of, freedom versus more control. And perhaps people are really unclear on, is freedom something we should be wanting? I mean, is it too much of a burden? Is that not even something worth striving for?
Right. Or would they rather have the benevolent dictatorship, like in the book?
Yeah.
Yeah. Where it's not the type of dictatorship where they're murdering their people,
right.
But it's everything is taken care of. I think that's where I don't know if it's where a lot of people are wanting to be.
Right.
I think that's what is put out there.
Right. If you look at our pop culture, I think the idea that every desire that you, especially sexual desire, I think that is something that he was hitting on that is taking place. I mean, try to watch TV with your kids. Good luck. I mean, the level of just sexuality, constant, like a hedonistic, there's no real message that this should be, a committed monogamous relationship. It's just like promiscuity, and that is held up as the ideal, family, and the idea of okay, you have a family and kids. That's seen as prison. That's not freedom. And so I don't know really where I was going with that.
But I would on that. I was thinking of in the book, where he talks about the babies are all test tube babies, right? There is no mother, there's no family, there's none of that. I thought when I was reading it, I was like, that's kind of way out there type of thing.
Mm.
We're nowhere near where their like babies are being created in a lab instead of by a mom and a dad.
Mm-hmm.
But then yesterday, I heard that thing about in Biden's budget. The word mother was replaced with birthing person.
Right, birthing person.
Birthing person, which the belief then is that a man, well, it is not a man because he's non-homogeneous. I don't know.
I don't think
that's not the term. It's so out there. I don't even know what the term should be.
Right.
But that there is no mother. There's a thing that has birthed this baby.
Right.
And that combined with the idea that having children isn't really a good thing.
Right.
And that many mothers, they're not birthing persons, are having children later and later. I heard a podcast a couple of weeks ago where the interviewer asked a woman about having a child so early in life. It's like, you had a kid really young, right? And she said, yeah, I was 23.
Oh, wow.
And I thought, that's not really young to have a child.
No.
You had ours at 21, our first one. And even then, it's not really young to have a child. So it's like all this push to have kids later and later could end up where women aren't able to have any children because their bodies change over time. And it's like, well, look, when you're 38, you can't have a kid, or you're only having one. Then there could be a push to make children in a lab.
Right.
Because then you can make them whatever you want them to be.
Right. There is already, like the designer babies, like they're trying to select for like, I want to have a boy with, blue eyes and that kind of a thing.
Well, that's reminiscent of 1930s Germany.
Right. Yeah. But I think there is, speaking as a woman, there is, or I felt certainly when I was, in that coming into adulthood, 18, that age right there was this tremendous pressure that I felt but you should not get married this young. You should instead put marriage off far into the future. You should go to college and perhaps graduate school, really get your career going. And that's really important. Career is really, really important. You gotta have that taken care of. And then at some point down the road, then you get married and then maybe you have kids. And
because obviously if you just go find a man, he can't take care of you.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's certainly, the message that I felt as a woman was that a terrible idea to depend on a man. That was the message, but at the same time, I ignored that. I had my own thoughts about it. I thought, no.
How dare you?
To me, I thought, well, the most important thing in life is family and, having kids and having a husband. And I don't foresee me wanting, a career per se. But it did feel like a countercultural thing that I was doing. Like I am defying what is being sold to my generation, which is, career is so important and that's where you get your fulfillment.
Right.
And I just think it's wrong. Based on my experience, work is great and everything. Like I've had various jobs and stuff, but it pales in comparison to the joy and fulfillment of being a wife and being a mom. And I know just by saying those words, that sounds to some people very backwards. Like I know that.
Don't worry, I'm going to censor it.
Right. But really, like it's just this lie. I think we've been sold that family's not important, or that even family is like a prison. Like certainly the feminist mantra is more like family and marriage, that's prison. That is this terribly suffocating. In a Brave New World, I say A, Brave New World, and that's wrong. There is no A. But in that, it talks about, it was terribly suffocating.
Mm-hmm.
These people, they would actually, the mother would actually have the children, and isn't that barbaric? And there would be kids in the house, and it was just so stifling. And now we're free. We don't have families, and it's just everyone's belonging to everyone else. And yeah, so I think at least part of that is being kind of pushed. That idea at least is being pushed.
Yeah, absolutely. And talking about history, we've touched on that a couple of times already, but we haven't really gone into what they talked about in the book. They removed everything other than from the time of Ford.
Mm-hmm.
So everything that had to do with Shakespeare or anything, okay?
Right.
And that is, I didn't know how evident that was in our world now. Until I was listening to a Jordan Peterson podcast with Yeonmi Park, and she talked about going to Columbia and how in their Western music appreciation course,
right,
they said that like Mozart and Beethoven should be canceled.
Right.
We shouldn't even listen to their stuff because they were racist and bigot.
Right.
And so that, along with the removal of statues of past military people or anything, it's just it is happening,
right? Like they're trying to erase history, and so that you don't know, like I guess that was the whole idea with Brave New World, was we're gonna forget that was a terrible time. Nothing good came of it, and you had to get rid of art and all these things, but you had to tell people at the same time, it's for your own good. It's for the social order. It's for order. It's for, that was an interesting thing. It talked about how the controller has to censor things, right? He has to take things out. And, this guy writes a report and it's factually correct, but he has to censor these things, not because they're incorrect, but because it would be, it would cause instability in society. So, you give that power to somebody always.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of the point, is even if you think, if we censor this, it'll get rid of that idea. But then you're giving your power away to some other person who then gets to decide what's good for you and what's not.
Right. Instead of allowing the culture in itself to just decide, you give that power to a few individuals.
Right.
Which is not good.
Right. But at the same time, that still is a choice by society to give that power. They're just saying, well, we should let this one person decide. But I do think that is happening to some extent. Certainly with like things on YouTube, things on Facebook are actively being censored. I mean, and it's very easy to prove that's happening. I mean, Facebook's been pretty forthright about, we take down posts that, we think are dangerous, but somebody's deciding that, and so I think it's an interesting thing that's happening, and I don't like it. I don't like the idea of it, but I don't know, like in the past when I read this book, gosh, it's been probably 15 years ago. I think I was pregnant with our oldest, and I remember thinking, but censorship and stuff like that doesn't really happen in America. That could never really happen here. But seeing these things on Facebook, it's like, oh no, this I think really is happening now. And maybe it happened in the past, but I can't think of a time really when it has happened on such a large scale here in America.
And being so evident, and people being very vocal about being okay with it. Right.
Yeah, that's, I think, the odd thing for me is to see so many people being in agreement with it. Oh, we should ban these ideas. You should, like get rid of people you disagree with, basically. Like get rid of any kind of disagreement has to be just done away with and then deleted from history. I mean, like people's accounts get banned and then you're just deleted. Like people have no record that they can look back on, which kind of goes back to 1984, where they would delete just whole sections of history.
Mm-hmm.
It happened in Brave New World too. Like the idea that one way to force a sort of social order, which is really controlling people, right? I mean, when
Well,
you
he
say,
was the controller.
yeah, I mean, yeah, but I think that's something to remember is the choices are freedom and a little chaos versus real stability, real like controlled stability, but at what cost? Like with no freedom and what is that really like? What the experience of that kind of reality?
Mm-hmm.
What is that like?
People don't know, and they're trying to. The ones who want that control, they don't know what it's like. In the where they're trying to go, right? Where the speech is controlled, where the thoughts are controlled,
right?
And well, they probably think, well, if I stay on the side of the government, then it's okay.
Right.
I'll get to say the things I want to say.
Mm-hmm.
Just they won't get to say the things they want to say.
Mm-hmm.
And they're okay with it.
Right.
There was this is about freedom to choose, and it was a video about the vaccine and people's freedom to decide whether they wanted to get it.
Right.
And so the video was this guy trying to get people to sign a petition that said those people who don't want to get the vaccine need to be put in jail until they get the vaccine.
Right.
We'll tell them, look, you have 30 days to get the vaccine, and if you don't, you're going to be put in jail. Mm-hmm. And people were signing this thing. Mm-hmm. And so that's frightening.
Right, yeah.
That people are afraid of risk, so much so that they'll say, yeah, if there's a dad who is working to provide for his family, but he doesn't want to get an injection, he should be put in jail.
Right. Yeah.
And so his family's going to starve.
And
right?
So, yeah, I think that is an interesting human tendency that we all kind of want to control other people. Mm-hmm. I think if we all really examine ourselves, we all have that tendency to want to control other people. Mm-hmm. Whatever that is, whatever side you're on, deep down, you think, oh, if I could just be in control, I'd whip everything into shape. I would know how to do all the things just perfectly. And so it is disturbing, but I don't think it's surprising to me that people would, say, well, I think, I think we should throw people in jail who do this or don't do that or for whatever reason, because that's just in the human heart to want to control people.
Right. And it's historical.
Right.
And it's happened before, not very long ago.
Right. Yeah.
And so for the thought of it happening anytime in the near future, it's not surprising.
Right.
Right. It's sad.
Oh, sure. Especially in America, I feel like I always had the notion that Americans love freedom. Like above all, in this nation, we love freedom. We love our freedom. And that's just how we are. But I don't think that that's as true as it once was, or maybe it was never really true. But I mean, we can talk about recent examples, but also, back in the day when the children of Israel were fleeing Egypt, they were slaves, literal slaves in Egypt. They were crying out to God, right? And God helps them escape. And there's this exodus into the desert. Right. And what happens? Like almost immediately, like hardly any time has elapsed, and they are begging to go back to Egypt, begging for slavery. So the idea that this has just never happened, right. I don't think so. I think it's always been human nature. There's always going to be this pull, between like, well, we say we want freedom, but really we want security. Right. And I think the real question is, what is really best for people, like on the individual level, what works best? There's a line somewhere in between freedom and control and security that it's hard to find. Yeah, I think it's always in the extremes where it's not good.
Mm-hmm.
Too much control, it leads to, people being shot in the head for having a difference of opinion.
Right.
And on the other hand, having no order at all
Mm-hmm.
and just saying, everybody just do whatever you want to do. That also ends in chaos and lots
Right.
of destruction. So I would say that there is a line. And that's why I think it's hard, for people when they read A Brave New World, they think, well, that could never happen. That's so ridiculous. That's so, that could never happen. But I think it does teach us lessons in, okay, if we let it get too far and we don't speak up when it's like, hey, that's not a good idea to have designer babies,
mm-hmm.
or, look what happened in Brave New World. I think it's helpful to at least speak up when you see things going on, and by reading books on the that take things to an extreme, I think that does help you learn, because again, like you were saying, it can be difficult in the moment to think, well, I do want some laws, I do want some control.
Mm-hmm.
The government should control some things, but at what point do we say that we can't just always, because that's always going to be the government's a justification of itself. Well, we have laws. Don't you want to have laws? Well, yes, we want to have laws, but there does come a point where government's going to overstep bounds, and I think the job of the people is to say, okay, yes, but not to that extent.
Yeah. When we were talking about things not seeming like they could happen,
Mm-hmm.
that's what I thought when I was reading about the test tube babies, all the babies that way. But then, so when I was reading it, I thought, well, okay, that's way out there,
Mm-hmm.
way out there. But then seeing that as a potential reality opened my eyes to even more possibilities within the book and what can happen in the world. And it scared me about that. So it's just something hard to
and again, there are some things that have been good. There are test tube babies, as far as that does happen in a lab. So it's not a huge leap to say in the future this could be a thing that happens. Is we no longer give birth because it's too dangerous, and then that does take away a real bond. I think that does happen. That there are people who are much smarter than I am that could really explain this, but the chemicals and everything that happen in you once you have a baby, or once you start breastfeeding, there's a whole other set of things that happen to you that make you very protective of your child, and it makes it so you won't put it in danger. And if we break that apart and say, well, mothers aren't really necessary, you can do it all in a lab. Look, biologically, we can do this now. We have that technology. I feel like that's going to be a problem, because there are reasons why we are built like we are built, and that was something in the book. It talked a lot about Christianity is not a thing anymore. Religion in general is not a thing anymore. He focused more on Christianity, I think, just because that's the religion that is present in England,
right.
Especially at that time. But that idea that those things are kind of bound up, I feel like the idea, Brave New World had this idea that the individual was nothing really. The individual's not important. Individualism is not important. It's all about the society, and that is ultimate importance. And it's almost like you can't have the two. Can you really have religion where, God is the upper thing? God's the thing you worship, and you're an individual created by God. You have individuality, and God did all this stuff on purpose, and there's a reason for all of it. Can that exist with this kind of dystopian society, where the individual is not important? I feel like that is a thing also that we have in our culture right now. The idea the individual isn't important. Society is the only thing that matters. It doesn't matter what you want. It's what is good for the entire group.
I think there's a lot of contradictory stuff when it comes to that, about the individual being important or not, or how society is controlling things. people want to be able to be their individual self, but then they also are mad that society kind of creates these rules about, well, if you're talking about like the gender, like gender identity, they say, well, society says that this is how
that's
a
true.
boy's supposed to be, but I'm my own thing. So, well, what do you want?
Right. Yeah, that's true. So in today's society, maybe it's not so much that the society is held up as the thing, but there is a sense that the individual is very important in a way. But I think ultimately that goes back to the ideals of religion. I mean, I think that's really the crux of a lot of the what would you call it? Like the conflict in society or in the culture right now. The idea that there is good and evil, and that there are things that are wrong and there are things that are right. That idea is really being challenged. I mean, I guess it's always been challenged, but where do you look for your ultimate authority on these issues? Because I think with so many, it's really just like whatever you think, like whatever you as an individual think about whatever issue, that is ultimate importance. Like you are God is kind of what's being sold. I feel like God isn't a thing. It's you are God. You are your own little God. Right.
But it's really not even you. Well, they may say that, but it's not you. It's whatever you're being fed.
Well, yeah.
And that goes back because they know that you're being pumped full of whatever it is they want you to think.
But see, you're using the word they.
Use they.
Right.
It's the government and the media and big tech and big pharma and big oil. They never talk about big oil anymore.
Yeah, that's not a thing anymore.
No.
That's interesting. It was for a while there. That was a thing, and now it's not there anymore.
Yeah.
So
big tech took over. That.
Yeah, but I think though that there's always this temptation to say this is brand new. This is, like we've never had anything like this before. And really, I think there's nothing new under the sun. Even in this book, he's talking about things, but I think it all goes back to that real question of what is the meaning of life? Why are we here? And depending on how you answer that question, I think that's which way you lean on what is the optimal society. Is there one where there's an individual and you get to have choices, and there's the choice to sin or to not, or to follow God or to not, or on the other hand, it's all about the good of this society that's tightly controlled, and it's all about this life. There's nothing past this, so just take your soma and be happy.
Right. I think that's how a lot of people are acting. Is just live in the moment because there's nothing later.
Right. But don't we all do that to a certain extent? I mean, I think there have been, if I look back, there have been times where we've certainly acted more like that than we have like, oh, there's an eternity to think about, or there are things that are transcendent that are more important than our daily comfort.
And it's not even about like being afraid of the well, I gotta act a certain way because there is an afterlife, so I better watch myself. I think what we've learned is that the living in the way, because we know that there is an afterlife, makes our life better. So I just feel better living in that way.
Right. Yeah. I think that is, in the book they say that soma is Christianity without the tears. And so it's billed as, Christianity is tough. Like, so religion is hard, that it requires self-sacrifice, self-discipline. You can't just do whatever the heck you want to do. I mean, I think that's the real issue is, according to God, no. There are rules, and you are to follow them.
And that's the way it should be. But apparently people are leaving the church. And the reason why, or that I've heard, is that because it's not difficult anymore to be a part of a church.
Right.
Yeah. Come, there's no real rules here. We're just we love everybody and that's it.
Right. There's no right or wrong anymore.
Yeah. Like, some sins, they're not really sins or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So then there's no, well, why am I here?
Right.
Like, if I could just not be here and live the same life, then what's the point? And I think that there needs to be a return to, look, you're supposed to struggle
right, yeah,
for this.
Right.
You need to be able to sacrifice something in your life for your religion,
right,
for Christianity in our space.
Right. Yeah, that was there was a quote. Let me see if I can find it.
People don't really want easy, I think. They say they do, but there's that the real joy comes in the struggle for something. Yeah,
he one of the quotes is in the book: "Industrial civilization is only possible when there's no self-denial." So, which again runs counter to religion in general. And I mean, traditionally, and I agree that there is, in a lot of churches, it seems like, just, and again, I've not visited every church. It seems like there is this general trend towards saying every behavior is okay and there's no need to change. You just do you, whatever that means to you, that's fine. There are no rules. Mm-hmm. And whereas traditionally, though, religion had aspects of self-denial. So the idea of, giving some of your money away, that's a tenet in, I would say, most major religions, certainly in Christianity. In Judaism, it was like 10% giving that away, or giving it to the church, sacrificing some of your finances for that. Fasting is another thing. That idea, no, you don't just eat all the time whenever you want to. There are times where we don't eat on purpose,
right,
for your betterment, for your soul's betterment. And it is hard. And again, it kind of goes back to, why would you do that to yourself? Why would you deny yourself anything? And if you think there is no soul and this is the only life that you have, and that there is no God and there is no afterlife, then I guess it does make sense to say, well, live it up now and don't even worry about, just be on a Soma holiday your entire life.
But to enjoy the reward, you have to have buy-in for our, in Christianity, to enjoy that reward, to really accept the love, you got to have some buy-in. Otherwise you feel unworthy because what have I done? Nothing, right. And I mean, and ultimately, no matter how much you sacrifice or what you do here on this earth, compared to God, you're not worthy, maybe, but the idea that you do need to deny yourself, and that will somehow improve you. It will somehow improve your life, your soul. And it does run counter to everything in the Brave New World, which is why they can't coexist. Right. Yeah, there was no denial of anything. No. That when we talked about a lot of the promiscuity that's in the book, and it was something that was ingrained in the children, even and that was a disturbing part of the book. How these children are running naked and they're supposed to just kind of explore each other, right? Yeah, and not just someone else, but just everybody. Everybody. Around. No personal boundaries, and that and it just made me think of this that I just heard about. You think, well, that's ridiculous. Like the idea that could even sort of become acceptable in any time in our future, there's just no way.
And then I think, like I kind of thought, well, yeah, but aren't shows, shows are more risque, even the ones that are kind of pointed towards kids are the kids are dressing in a skimpy outfits, and there are lots of behaviors that are more sexualized, but you think, but it, that's kind of harmless. But then I just heard of someone who tweeted out, I can't remember who she was exactly. She was trying to promote the idea we should have porn for kids. And now here was her argument. And this is, I think, this is why there's always going to be a seemingly good argument. Because here was her argument. Well, kids are accessing porn younger and younger and younger, 11 years old for, the average boy, it's 11.
Mm-hmm.
And so since we know that that's happening, and since the general progression tends to be once they access it, they start accessing more and more like out there kind of perverted stuff, and it's like disturbing.
Like heroin, once you do one, then you got to do more and more.
Yeah, and to get that same, because your brain gets addicted to it, so it's like I got to have a harder hit of this, and it can get to the very disturbing type of like rape type stuff. And so her argument, which she did delete the tweet really quickly, I think, but
oops.
But
that's not really what I mean.
But her idea was, well, if you at least made it for kids, then you could kind of control that level. But that's what I'm saying. I think that's the kind of thinking in Brave New World is we can control it. We can, it's not so bad if you make it, this is just erotic play for kids,
Mm-hmm.
I think but again, if you're only thinking about this life and that's all you get, and there's no real such thing as morals,
mm-hmm.
or there is right and wrong that transcends everything else, I think you're left with that kind of thinking,
right?
That makes sense. And we don't want kids looking at this, so we should control it and make it less disturbing.
Right. Like there's no option where you can just say, you shouldn't watch this.
Yeah, perhaps instead of, because I'm thinking, perhaps the problem is too many screens, and we should really be rethinking
mm-hmm.
the idea that every kid has unfettered access to everything just on their phone. Maybe that's just a really bad idea,
mm-hmm.
because where that leads us is porn for kids.
Yeah. And it's kind of like the abstinence argument.
Oh, right.
Where it's like, well, they're going to be doing it anyway, so we need to make sure that we give them all the supplies that they need.
Right. Mm-hmm,
a teenager is going to remember to do things.
But you're right. There is that same kind of thinking. It's a foregone conclusion that they're going to access it. So let's change what they see.
Mm-hmm.
Or,
and that's the pervasive thing. It's like the belief is that people can't control themselves.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So we need to control what they're seeing, what they're doing.
Right.
And whatever. So they say, look, kids are going to have sex anyway. So that's the line. They're going to do it anyway.
Right.
So you might as well just do this.
Mm-hmm.
Kids are looking at porn. So we might as well give them what we think is safe.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Safe.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Because they feel like we can't make choices for
mm-hmm.
ourselves.
Right.
There is no individual that says, no, I don't.
Right.
Tell them there's that option.
Right. But see, that runs counter to that idea
mm-hmm.
that, the society is number one, the individual has no power, they can't control themselves. Mm-hmm. And that was kind of a thing that I think it's human nature. The Mustafa Mond, he's like the head honcho, the big controller, and he has books, he has the Bible, he has poetry, and he can access that mm-hmm. whenever he wants to. But see, he's up here and everyone else is down here. He can control himself and he knows how to do this.
He understands it.
Yeah.
The other people wouldn't understand it.
And that is a human thing, that the people in power tend to think that way. I mean, mm-hmm. it seems certainly like that, there's various news story that you can Google of, just hypocrisy in the leadership, especially during the pandemic.
Yeah.
Things, publicly they'll say, oh, you must do this or that. They're not doing it. But the idea is, well, for social stability, I have to say these things, but really, the people who really know, they can behave whatever way they feel is the correct way because they're in power.
Right. At their echelon, they can understand things
Right.
and we can't
Mm-hmm.
because we're just lowly gammas and epsilons.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So is there anything else that we haven't covered that would be of some pertinent information
I don't,
for those who are still with us?
Yeah, I don't think so. I think that it's a good book to read, despite its being, at this point,
90 years old.
90. Wow, 90 years
Yeah.
old. It stands up, I think, to the test of time. And there are things that I think are a little bit silly, or it seems silly, like just some of the phrases and things. But ultimately, I think he hit the nail on the head for a lot of stuff, or at least kind of gave some warnings, and he ended up being pretty accurate on. So, which leads me to believe that it's been worth reading because it's like he saw this coming, or at least some of it coming.
Mm-hmm.
So perhaps he had some good warnings to give us, things to think about. And even though it's unpleasant to read, I think it's worth it. I mean, we had our 15-year-old read this book. It is again, there's some disturbing stuff in it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not so
graphic.
It's not so graphic. Yeah, that even things like orgy porgy, that's like there are orgies that take place again, because this is all about, it's not monogamy, it's promiscuity, and it's just whenever and whatever, and there's no limits on that stuff. But it's not dealt with in the same way that so much modern literature deals with sexual things, if that makes sense. Like, yes, they allude to it, but it's not, to me, it's like not going to be too, what's the word? Like, it's not titillating. It is, like I would say mature teenagers, like 15 is, I would say, probably the youngest, I would say. And
if you have a question about that, then you read it for yourself.
Yeah, first. I think every parent should read the book first and then have the discussions with the kid. I think it is a good book though for teenagers, because I think it's a good way to push back against the narrative, which is in pop culture, which is any kind of sex you want to have whenever you want to have it, and with whoever and however many. This is what that leads to. That kind of philosophy leads to this kind of society. Is that what you want? Right.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a good place to
so.
Stop. The book is Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. Again, it is 90 years old, but very poignant for today. We'll put a link in the description so you can get it on Amazon if you'd like. Probably you could find it at a used bookstore or a Goodwill or something, but instead of having to go through all the shelves. Although that's how I prefer to buy books, is from the shelf, because it's like a surprise at the bottom of the Cracker Jack box. Is Cracker Jack, has that been canceled?
I don't know.
Do we know?
Maybe.
Yeah. Well, thanks for joining us for this first installment of whatever this is called, where we had some coffee and talked about a book. Yeah. I had a good time.
I did too.
All right. I hope to see you soon.
Yeah. Back at you.
Bye.